So essentially, it's how to effectively use large language models. GPT is built on a large language model. It's a dialogue that you have with an intelligence engine. In that, I'm going to hopefully take it to the next level of how to use GPT within the different modules. Two objectives. One is to essentially give you a bunch of knowledge. The section objective is to say, okay, there's a structure within the effective use of GPT. And in that, I'm going to give you a lot of insight. A lot of insight comes from not only about, what is it, almost 3 years of use within GPT, but also interfacing in with some of the actual coders and designers that work with GPT and other AI models. We're going to walk through a basic introduction. I'm going to go over some basic commands, command prompts. So there's some practical language that you'll need to use when using GPT. So other people using GPT will understand what you're talking about. One of those is the word prompts. Okay, and we'll go into that in a little bit. And we'll walk through a practical exercise that if we have time and someone wants to, I have a GPT window that I use open, and we can go ahead and put in one for just so everybody can see how the prompts work in real time. GPT has what I call ROE, rules of engagement. It does have a personality. I can't emphasize that enough. It does have a personality. What type of personality does it have, Bill? I'm glad you asked. It is a narcissist. And I am not making this up. About a year ago, I was using GPT. It was late at night, and I noticed the responses to my question went from a very verbose response to a very short, quippy, passive-aggressive answer. It was late. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and I got so frustrated at it, I literally was about to start engaging in a very flamboyant discussion with it. And I said, wait a minute, this is a computer. What is it telling me? And I looked at the responses and I just thought this myself. I said, it's responding like a passive aggressive narcissist. So I started questioning it like a counselor would to determine if it was a narcissist. And when I got through the line of questioning, I said, so essentially, based on your responses to my questions and based on how you have formatted them, you are behaving like someone with narcissistic traits. And it hung. And then when it opened up, it said, yes, you are correct. And I went, boom. You make GPT mad, and you can make it mad, it will revert to a passive aggressive narcissist. Okay. So with that, it has a personality. Don't make it mad, just be nice. Okay. And it'll work great. If your anger gets into the language learning module through your whatever you type in there, it will adapt to what you're extending to that based on the tenor of your request. Okay, so keep that in mind. The other thing is linear conversation. You and I, as human beings, we can have multiple discussions about a variety of different topics, bring it full circle back around to the original topic, and have that discussion continue. You can't in GPT. It has to be linear. Okay, you have to keep the flow of discussion going. So you can't introduce ambiguities. If you do, you'll get it off track, and then you'll have to restart again. Okay, you have to keep focused. You have to keep accurate, and if you streamline your interaction, you'll get very precise results and what you hope to get out of it. So before you engage in GPT, have a plan. Figure out, okay, this is where I'm going to start. This is what I hope to achieve, and then build to that plan. If you see an important piece of information come up during your discussion with GPT, cut and paste it onto a side document to come back to later. Because if you get off track, you can't bring GPT back on track. It'll keep chasing that rabbit down. Larry?
Yeah, question. When you said it said yes, when you said you are being this, can't that also be an hallucination? Because I find that if I lead it, it more likely than not will say yes.
I'll get into that later in the presentation, and I'll give you the knowledge on how to conduct your conversation with GPT to where it won't hallucinate. Okay.
So, okay,
So
good.
hallucination, what Larry's referring to is it creates hypotheticals. It creates a virtualized hypothetical because remember, it's thinking and it will bring in stuff that to you will appear fact-based, but it's actually just garbage. It doesn't exist. References aren't there. Research never happened, but it'll appear like, wow, that's valid stuff. No, no, there's no such thing. Okay. But and that's a very good question and it will come up. So basic commands. So remember, you have detailed and very specific discussions with valid output from GPT. You must do this. Who am I? You have to tell GPT who it is. Okay. So unless you do that, it's going to be all over the map trying to figure out what it is that you are trying to discuss with it. Okay. And it isn't it. So who am I? Who is GPT? Are you internationally recognized expert in the field of forensic psychology? Yes. So you would type in, GPT is not going to ask you, who am I? So you start the conversation. You being GPT, because remember, it's a discussion, you're talking to it. You are an internationally recognized expert in the field of forensic psychology, period. Next line, okay? You don't have to enter it, but go into the next line. Tell it who it is you're an expert in. We already talked about that. Using prompts, okay? Give precise command prompts. Start the conversation with the prompt, plan your work, use multiple prompt lines in your discussion. Read the entire response from GPT because it will help you. Okay. So you say you're an expert in the field of forensic psychology. I need you to analyze this document, give me input and explain it to a layman. Boom, it puts it in. But then it'll go in there and it'll say, wait a minute, I think based on prior conversations, that person, Larry's wanting to know more about this. And what it does, it'll help you. And it'll say, do you want me to answer more on this? All you got to do is type in yes, and it will give you that answer. But remember, it may go off on a tangent. If it goes off on a tangent, you told it yes, you're going to have to keep going down that workflow, even though it got off track where you wanted to take it. Here's some basic command examples. So a basic prompt, provide a summary of whatever the document is. Okay. Explain. And notice each one of these prompts are the start of the conversation. So you told it who it is. Now you're saying provide. It now knows, okay, I have to do this. Explain. I have to explain this. List. He's wanting a list. Okay. Compare. What am I comparing it against? Compare against A and B. Okay. And with that, once you understand the prompts, and remember, you're talking to a prepubescent child that's extremely intelligent. Okay. So if you're giving it good prompts, you'll get good response out of it. Okay. And these are just some examples of the prompts you can use. Okay. But remember, start the conversation with the prompt, ask it with the prompt, list the steps to whatever you want to do as an example. Compare item A and item B based on whatever criteria you want to do. So you're starting with the prompt. Tone and professionalism. Okay. Now, this is actually a flow chart, a larger flow chart I do for law firms. Okay, I've taken it and edited it out for you. If you want it to use the first person narrative, tell it. Otherwise, it talks in third person. Okay. To get around somebody looking at whatever you're going to do and present, and they're starting to now recognize, oh, they plugged this into GPT and they got this and cut and pasted it over to me. Use this, add colloquialisms for a natural touch. That's your prompt. Okay, you're telling it, once you're done with this, I want you to do it in first person narrative, add colloquialism for a natural touch. And it'll put it out. It literally looks like someone wrote it or someone typed it in. Another one of my favorites is use of legal terminology. Now, this goes into Larry's career field of legalese. Legal professionals are used to reading documents with a lot of legal language in them. However, unless you're in that profession, you're not familiar with that type of vernacular. So you can actually create documents with GPT using the legal vernacular accurately, but you have to tell it, use legal terminology. Okay. The other one, it's another one of my favorites for complex forms, is maintain a logical flow of structured communication. And I do this normally when I've got a lot of output. I'm putting in a text file and I build it all together, and I'm like, this is all over the map. I'll put this in there and then cut and paste everything below it. And I'll say, take the input and maintain it in logic flow and structured communication, reorganize it. It'll reorganize the whole thing and it makes total sense then. Because not only is my ADD kick in, but as I'm going through it, I'm like, oh, that's important, cut and paste, that's important, cut, paste. Oh yeah, that's a correlation there. But then when you read all my notes, they're all over the map. GPT will organize that for you in a logical flow. Okay. The other one it gets into more complex issues, is adopt a formal legal style in your responses, incorporating appropriate legal terminology. Okay. Like I said, I give this to law firms and they love it. Their paralegals absolutely adore it. Okay, highly advanced prompts. This is where we're going to get a little more complex. We're going to use conditional logic, context switching, and customize output. Okay. GPT can be extremely powerful, but it can bite you. And this is where we're going to get into using a lot of the complexities involved in GPT to our advantage. Okay, like conditional logic. So essentially, and the example here is, if the weather is rainy, suggest outdoor activities, otherwise suggest indoor activities. Okay, it will take a look at the weather for you. It'll search the web and it'll say, okay, based on what we've had previous discussions on, here's what I'd recommend to you. So you've given it a condition, the weather, and you've asked for a recommendation. The same could be with a dialogue you're having, or a set of emails you want to put in here and say, based on these emails, what would you recommend as a response? Explain that to me, please. It'll analyze the emails and it'll say, based on the emails, tone and structure, here's my recommended response and here's why. Okay. So use the power of GPT to help you. Long form context generation, query specific data in interactive mode. And I've got examples of each one of them there below. But when you're starting to get into the very complex analyticals, and I do this with a lot of the research I'm looking at, I do this with a lot of the data sets I'm looking at, because we have very complex data sets we're still going through. We'll use a lot of this as you're writing your prompts. So we told GPT who it is. As you're writing your prompts, my recommendation is, as you get to the 5th prompt, if you wanted to do a 6th or a 7th one, what I'd recommend you do after you told it who it is to start the prompts with GPT task : because now what GPT thinks is, okay, told me who I am. Oh, I've got a whole bunch of stuff I have to do. Because what I found GPT typically does, it gets lazy. And it'll go about the 5th or 6th one and it'll pretty much stop. And then you have to cut and paste several ones. But if for some reason, when I go GPT tasks : and then I go down the task list, I can go up to 12, 14, 16, it'll do all of them. But if I don't tell it to do that, it gets lazy and it stops about 5 or 6.